In my book, I talk about this very strange experience I had representing serial killer John Wayne Gacy. And your listeners are probably saying it sounds like it's a horrible situation. Well, it sort of was a horrible situation. It was something that I voluntarily wanted to do because I'm against the death penalty. But I naively thought that this was going to be something that didn't have a lot of backlash, and it did.
You're listening to the Woman of Value podcast. You are about to hear the story of a woman who is following her dreams and passions and creating positive change in the world. My guest today is Karen Conti. She is one of Chicago's most prominent lawyers and legal analysts. For 37 years, she has litigated cases across the country and handled numerous high-profile and noteworthy cases. She's a dynamic speaker, writer, and media personality, and for the past 30 years, she has been on many forms of media. She hosted award-winning radio shows in Chicago, and she's the host of a popular weekly broadcast, The Karen Conti Show. She's been a regular commentator on all the local news television stations, as well as CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, News Nation, and National Desk, where she had a weekly segment. And she's the author of the new book, Killing Time with John Wayne Gacy, Defending America's Most Evil Serial Killer on Death Row. Welcome to the podcast, Karen.
Sandy, thank you so much for having me.
Very impressive resume you got there.
Well, thank
you. What I always start with is, what does woman of value mean to you?
Well, I think it's changed over the years. And, you have different goals when you're young. And now that I'm not so young anymore, I kind of look at it as a woman who is free. And when I say free to make choices that are good for you. I think when I was young, I didn't feel that I could make choices without hurting somebody or needing to impress somebody or having a significant other approve of what I was doing. And I think that being a woman of value is making your own choices based upon what you think is right, what you think is good for you, and of course, keeping in mind other people's feelings. But I think that having those choices and that freedom means that you're a person of value.
I love that. I love the focus on choice and also on the wisdom of aging, because I think that when we're younger, we just have so much focus on what other people think and how other people feel about us and the choices we make. And there comes a time that hopefully when you're really clear about your values and your value, that you make better choices and you think more about, is this right for me, rather than will I make everybody happy?
And I think women get that much more than men. I do some family law work now, so I understand that some women, when they blend into a family or with a husband, they're the ones who compromise in a lot of cases, not always, but in a lot of cases. And compromising is great because in relationships, whether it's a friendship or a significant other, you do have to compromise, but you don't want to compromise too much. And if that person is not compromising the same way you are and supporting your goals the way you're supporting that person's goals, then you need to check that out and you need to make it right.
Yeah, I so agree. I mean, I was married for many years to somebody where I was constantly pretzeling myself to make the marriage work. And it was very one-sided for a majority of the time, which is why I ultimately left the marriage.
Yeah.
And, we tried to work it out, but you can't make it work when the balance is so off and the other person isn't willing to make the same sacrifices, because every relationship requires some compromise, but not when you're compromising your value and your values.
Absolutely.
So let's go to the next topic, which is your woman of value moment, that moment or moments when things started to change for you and you started to recognize your own worth.
In my book, I talk about this very strange experience I had representing serial killer John Wayne Gacy. And your listeners are probably saying, well, how does that how is that a pivotal moment? That sounds like it's a horrible situation. Well, it sort of was a horrible situation. It was something that I voluntarily wanted to do because I'm against the death penalty, but I naively thought that this was going to be something that didn't have a lot of backlash, and it did. So for 7 months, when I was representing this evil serial killer on death row, I was getting death threats and bomb threats, and I was getting shunned by people. And even judges and lawyers were questioning why I was doing this. Even people who were against the death penalty were very critical of what I did. And I think during that time, I really changed because here I was in a spotlight. There was a lot of media attention. There was a lot of focus on this case. It was one of the first uses of capital punishment in a long period of time in Illinois, and it got international attention. And as a result, I had to be really strong. I had to stand up in front of people who were a lot smarter than me, had a lot more wisdom and experience than I had, and I had to know my stuff. I had to be better than everyone. I had to look better than everyone. I had to be prepared in a way that I'd never been prepared before. And all of those experiences benefited me in the long run. And in this book, I look back at the 30 years after his execution, and I looked at how all of those skills that I gained and all of that confidence that I gained made me resilient. And you can't mess with me anymore. You just can't. You can send a death threat. I'm a different person because of that difficult experience. And I think the moral of the story is you don't have to represent a serial killer to gain resilience, but I think every experience in your life, whether it's a divorce or whether it's a death in the family or a serious illness or firing from a job, you will get over it, hopefully, and you will be better for it if you accept that that's part of life and not become bitter and become disappointed.
I have never experienced what you experienced, obviously, but I have been through some really hard challenges where you think I'll never get through this, or this is the hardest thing I'm ever going to have to go through. And it all depends on how you see it, right? So you were talking about how you became more resilient, how this experience showed you who you were as a person. It really put a spotlight in many ways, both literally and figuratively, on your values, on who you are. And it showed you that you can withstand a lot of pressure, which I think is a great way to come out of it and to look at it and to then take those strengths moving forward.
Absolutely. And I think there are some traits that are good to have when you go through these. And I think one of them is just getting in your mind, this is a bad time. I acknowledge that. Like, this is stressful. But you see the other side. It's not going to always be this way. And try to figure out, what can I gain during this time? During this time that I'm stressed out and I'm upset and I can't sleep, what are the things I'm going to learn and put in my little life basket so I can use it later? And if you kind of do that out of body experience, I think that helps. And also humor. I've always found that, again, you can't laugh at everything in life, but if you can make light of things and kind of look at it from the funny standpoint and kid about it, even if it's in your own head, that helps. It puts things in perspective, and laughing, as we all know, is very good for your soul. So those are my two bits of advice.
No, I love that because I agree. I mean, I have laughed in the darkest moments of my life. And I remember when I was married, my husband, who was actually a professional comedian, used to get really upset with me because I would laugh at the darkest, most awful things. But it was my way of dealing with it. And it's ironic that he was a comedian and he found no humor in these things that I did. And yeah, it's definitely a way to work through the hardest things. I mean, it's what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but sometimes it does kill you. Um, yeah, so tell us a little bit more about the book. It sounds like a really interesting story, and take us into that whole experience for you.
Sure. Well, the draw, of course, of the book is the name John Wayne Gacy because he killed 33 young men and boys and buried most of them under his house in the Chicago area back in the 1970s. And I was in high school when that was going on. And then flash ahead 14 years, I'm a lawyer now. I'm an inexperienced young lawyer, and I get the call to represent him. And my partner and I did not have to represent him. We took this on voluntarily because of our strong belief that the death penalty was wrong, even for the poster child of evil. And so we took on the cause, not just for Gacy, but for other people on death row who might have defenses like actual innocence or racist prosecution or competent counsel. And we took it on for 7 months and fought it, and we lost. Spoiler alert. And Gacy was executed in May 1994. And this book is, though, not really all about Gacy. It's not about his crimes. That's not my story to tell. It's about the time that I spent with him. It's about the time that I changed by being next to someone who was evil, but yet had some humanity to him, trying to understand why someone who was so normal in some ways could do the most horrible things I could even imagine. And it was about having the courage to stand up and say this in light of all of the backlash. But the book is also about, as a female, how I take these little side trips in my book about how I was singled out when I was arguing before the US Supreme Court. One of the justices questioned whether or not I was really a member of the bar. I was the only woman that day arguing. There were 2% of all women, 2% of all people arguing before the Supreme Court during that time were women. So I was singled out, questioned as to whether or not I was actually allowed to be there. And so I talk about these things, not to whine about them, but to show that those things still go on and that you need to react in the right way and not get discouraged and not quit, your profession because you're treated in a way that you don't like. And that there's a point where you need to just demand that you be treated fairly, and you need to be firm about it. So the book is about humanity. It's about serial killer. It's about the psychology of a serial killer, but it's also about how things can change when you take on this difficult task.
I want to talk about the fact that there is humanity in everybody. When I was studying nonviolent communication, a form of communication that I now teach my clients, and one of the stories with the founder of nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg, had gone to prison and was talking to people who had committed horrible things with children. I don't remember exactly what it was, but child molesters, some really awful criminals. And he got curious about what need of theirs was met when they were molesting children, which is a strange question to ask. And these people would say, I felt empathy. There was like a sense of empathy that what these children were going through was what they had gone through as children. And it was the only time that they felt that. And so that was like a wake-up call to me for humanity of people who do some evil things, that there's some trauma that is pretty awful usually in their lives, and or mental illness. I mean, there's so many reasons why people do what they do. But that whole piece on humanity, I think, is important for us. And even with regular people, like people who are dating and think everybody's different from them, find the things that are similar. I love the focus on how do we find the humanity in other people, even when they're not good people.
Yeah, a couple things to say about that, Sandy. And one is a little off topic, but I like to travel, and I've been to 50 countries. And one of the things about traveling that I love is that you have your mindset. I'm going to Russia. Oh, I'm going to not like these people. Or I'm going to Vietnam, and they're not going to like us because of the war and what we did there and Agent Orange. But when you get to these countries, people are just like us. They want the same things in life. They want good food, clean water. They want a nice place to live. They want their children to be safe. They want a nice job where they can make money and support themselves. So you see this commonality, and we don't look alike. We don't live in even the same hemisphere, but we are all very, very similar. And it's easy to say those people are bad. until you meet them, until you dine with them, till you touch them. And so I think that that's really a good point, that we have so much more in common than we don't. And as to the people like Gacy and the people who are doing these horrible things, you know that old phrase, hurt people hurt people. It doesn't mean that if you're hurt, you're going to turn into a John Wayne Gacy. I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying is that there's a cause for some of these things. And I really strain to find out, even among my clients who have done not so bad things, embezzled from churches, men who beat their wives. Like, why are you doing this? Let's figure this out. Let's figure out how to stop you from doing these things that are harming others, but harming yourself too. And, when you take that holistic approach to lawyering, can't fix it all, but I think it helps. And that's why I like to humanize everybody, because I can help you if I understand you, or at least understand that small part of you that I can relate to.
Yeah, I can imagine as an attorney who represents people who have done things that are not so good, that you do have to focus on the things that you can get behind. And otherwise, you probably wouldn't do what you do, I imagine.
Right. And people always say that to me. How could you do that? He's horrible. Well, I represent, I've represented asbestos making manufacturers. I represented people. I've also represented victims of crime who hired me to try to get the defendant prosecuted. And I do that zealously too. So we try not to judge our clients. Now, do you condone what they do? No, you don't. But it's like the doctor. The guy comes in, he's 50 pounds overweight. He smokes 3 packs of cigarettes a day. He's having a heart attack. The doctor doesn't say, sorry, you really didn't take care of yourself. Go somewhere else. No, you just treat somebody and you do what you have to do, and that's your job. And listen, justice gets done when everybody does their job in the system, right? The prosecution and the judge and the jury, if they all do their job, including the defense attorney, justice usually gets done. And, a lot of people say Gacy got justice. But I know, and I will tell you, he got zealous advocacy. That's all that you can ask for.
If you have ever played small to make other people feel comfortable, or maybe stayed in a bad relationship or job too long because you didn't think you could do any better, I wrote a book for you. It's called Becoming a Woman of Value: How to Thrive in Life and Love. Each of the 30 chapters contains a life lesson, a story, and an exercise to bring you closer to reaching your full potential. Becoming a Woman of Value is available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. What would you rather see other than the death penalty? Because you said you're very against it, and that's why you took on this case.
I think there are certain people that need to go away for life, and life meaning life, no possibility of parole. I definitely think Gacy is a person who should never see the light of day. I never tried to get him out of prison. He didn't want to get out of prison. I just don't think it works. And I think people ask me, why should we abolish the death penalty? And I rephrase that by saying, why should we have it? No civilized country in the Western Europe has the death penalty. States are now abolishing it. It's expensive. It doesn't deter. It's inflicted in a horrible racial manner. And the lawyers, there's no rich people on death row. I can't name one rich person on death row. If you have good lawyers, you're not gonna get it. So it's an unfair system. It doesn't do anything to forward this society. But I do think there are people that need to be locked up for the rest of their lives.
Thank you for clarifying that. Let's talk a little bit about the rest of your life. And you mentioned earlier about being a woman, and especially in the beginning when you were a new attorney and you took on this case. What has changed for you? What have been some of the obstacles? I'd love to hear about that.
I think that I got the brunt of the backlash during Gacy. I was his only female attorney in all the years he was on death row, and the only one at the very end. And I asked some psychologist friends of mine about this because I thought, look, why are they focusing on me? And there's an idea that when a woman is doing what is traditionally thought of as a man's job, which lawyering would be in that category, that a lot of people will try to sexualize you because that diminishes your strength. And I got a lot of that. that. A lot of the hate mail was very sexual in nature and disturbing and threatening that way, sexually threatening. And so I think there's a lot of that. And I think that spills over to when you see police departments. That's a very traditional male job. And you see many, many females who come on the job who get this kind of treatment. Not all, I'm just saying many. It's very common. So I think if you can understand some of the harassment and discrimination, it helps you. I look back now and I talk about this in my book. It was my very first job, and I traveled with my boss. And I get to the hotel in another town, and he says there's only one room available. So of course I had to go to the desk, and that was false. And they gave me a new room, and I had to use my own money to pay for it. But that's how my career started. As if, I'm going to just go sleep in a bed with somebody I don't even know. But that wasn't about wanting to date me. That was about power. That was about controlling and exerting control over me. And I didn't really see it then. Now I see it, and I would have treated that differently. I think I would have done a few things to show that he had no control over me, and maybe said some things very directly and politely to him about the fact that he doesn't. But if you understand these things, I think it's easier to combat them instead of getting angry or upset. Or, I see a lot of women quit because they can't take it anymore. And I get that. Especially if you're being, pawed on the workplace, and if it's becoming a dangerous situation, you have to get out of there. But understanding it and giving it a shot to try to rectify it is really important for your own level of confidence in your own career. Because why should you leave every time someone does something wrong to you? It's just not the way it should go.
Yeah, I agree. Wow, what a crazy situation. To have him tell you there was only one hotel room, I can't even imagine, especially as a young person when you don't yet have a clear voice and you're not so practiced at standing up to people in power. I mean,
It's
it is intimidating.
it's pernicious. And, I put myself through 4 years of college. I put myself through 3 years of law school. I worked really, really hard to get to where I was. And this guy thought that this was his playground, and that I was part of his playground. And I look at that and I think that's really horrible. And
Yeah.
I would hope that I've been mentored by women, and I've been mentored by some really good men too. So I think there's some men out there who can help rectify those situations, and who can and should stand up when they see that kind of stuff go on.
Yeah. You're making me think about Martha Stewart, who there was a recent documentary on HBO Max that I watched, and she was a stockbroker at a time when women were not doing stocks, and she created a brand at a time when women were not doing what she did. I mean, she really was a trailblazer in many ways, whether we agree with how she did what she did or whatever. But it was, especially in her time, was 70s, 80s, I think she was in stock exchange in the 70s or 80s. And yeah, I mean, I get a lot of strength from seeing women who rise up and who are trailblazers and are not afraid to be themselves and to blaze a path where other people have not been able to in the past. So take us to where you are today. What's your life look like? What is going on for you in your business? Tell us all.
Well, I like to diversify. And so I'm at a point in my career that I'm enjoying probably more than I ever have. Being a lawyer is very stressful. A lot of people have stressful jobs. I'm not saying it's any more stressful, but I know that if I put other things into my life, maybe that aren't as money making as being a lawyer, I will be happier, and my career will go better in the long run. So I have this law firm that I founded. It's a small firm. I do mostly family law. I have a partner who does some employment law. I have a 2 hour radio show in Chicago. I do legal commentary all over the place, national and local. And now this book has launched. And so I'm doing some media on that. And, it makes me happy to have that kind of creative side of me that does that commentary, come up with topics, come up with questions, how to explain to people the law. I find that really important that someone speaks plainly and explains the law, not from a political standpoint, not on one station and not on another station, but somewhere where I can just say, here's what the law is and here's what it means. And so I'm enjoying that part of it. I'm a very active person. I used to run marathons and I did bodybuilding. And now I get up in the morning really early and I have a life cycle and I sit on my bike and I go through all my emails and I read 100 books a year and I read 3 newspapers a day and I read voraciously. And so by the time I'm off the bike, hour and a half, I've accomplished a lot. I've sweated a lot, perspired a lot, and then I can have a big breakfast, so and not feel so bad about it. So that's one of my tricks in life: getting up early and exercising while I work. So
Multitasker, the
yes,
woman after my
exactly.
own heart. I love it. I mean, I just recently joined a gym. I had been out of a gym for so long. I just did exercise at home. I have an exercise bike and I walk. And I realized there was this whole central part of me, the core, that was not really getting a lot of exercise, and my arms were not getting enough weights, and I'm loving taking yoga and Pilates and taking just full body workouts with weights and squats and all the things that I haven't been doing for a long time. You can be active and then you can also ignore parts of your body. So it feels so good to start your day that way. I
Yes,
used to start with a walk, coffee and a walk, and
yeah,
then and listen to a podcast. So that's when I
and
like to
it's
learn, but
so good for your mind too.
it
Your
is.
stress levels. You sometimes I wake up in the morning, grinding my teeth, thinking of all the things I have to do. But when I get off that bike, I really calm myself down, and it's a good thing.
Yeah.
In the
Earlier
words of Martha
today,
Stewart, it's a good
yeah, it's a good thing, right?
thing.
Earlier today, I gave a lunch and learn presentation about effective leaders, qualities of an effective leader to a big corporation. And one of the qualities was effective leaders are lifetime learners. They are always learning and growing. They have open minds. It's all the things that we're talking about today. It's so important if you want to grow as a person, but also to inspire other people. And you're staying active by doing lots of things that have balance. And I agree. I think it's so important to have more than one thing going on in your life, and they don't all have to be lucrative to make you happy.
Yeah, and I'm a big one for thinking about the word curiosity, because I look at what I did with Gacy. I mean, I just wanted to go down to death row and meet him because I wanted to look evil in the eye. It was just an experience that I wanted. And then I got sucked into the whole thing. But I always tell people, we are born with innate curiosity, but we lose it along the way in some cases because we don't want to step out of our comfort zone. We're too busy, we're too tired. We become insecure that we can't do something because we haven't done it in the past. But I just really like to challenge myself. Like even just when I'm reading a newspaper, I look at an article that I would never care about, whether it's a sports article or something about a country I know nothing about, and I force myself to read it because I should be curious. And if I'm not, I'm going to make myself curious. And it really is a great thing to do because it opens up your mind and it teaches you to always be looking at those things. Travel to a place you never thought you'd go. Get out of your comfort zone and don't go to Las Vegas again. Go somewhere else. Take a road trip. Or talk to somebody who you think you have nothing in common with. That's fun to do. So maybe you think that person is completely opposite of your political views. Talk to that person. You don't have to tell them what your views are, just listen. And you don't have to like that person or the views, but it is something that we should all be doing more these days.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think part of my career is I am a dating coach and a relationship coach. In dating, people have so many unconscious biases that they will negate people because they remind them of an ex, or they once dated a lawyer and then it didn't work out, so they never want to date a lawyer again. We have all these crazy unconscious biases that some of them are conscious, some are unconscious, but that we bring to our lives. And somebody may start out a conversation with you and it sounds boring, but like try to make it more interesting. Like, what can we do to make our lives more interesting and to really get out of our comfort zone and do things that we thought we never could do or that we thought were not for us? And it's again why people should not marry their clones, because somebody can bring a whole level of another world to you, and that can make your life so much more interesting.
I totally agree with you. And I lost my husband after my law partner was my husband, and he
Oh.
died suddenly on Valentine's Day in 2011. He was very
Mhm.
young, and it was a shock. And when you start out on that dating process again, you think sort of like, you have a dog that dies, and maybe you think, oh, I can replace that dog with the same dog, that looks like it. You can't. There's nobody like. We're all unique. So instead of having a list, and I hear the list, got to be over 6 foot tall, got to be a doctor or a lawyer, got to be someone who's Catholic. When you have a list, I call that being alone because the things that you love about someone are not just because of the way they look, of course, or even just like their interests. It's the core, whatever that core is: loyalty, humor, desire to, have fun, intelligence, curiosity. All of those things can come in all different shapes and sizes and religions and heights and weights. And you should not just look at somebody and look at their stats and say, that's not for me. That's why those dating apps, to me, and I've never been on one, but I've seen people on them. I mean, you just dismiss people because of some baseball hat they have on or something. And again, I mean, there are some things you have to weed out, I suppose, but you got to give people a chance.
Yeah, but you're talking about the most important things, and that's how we connect to people in general. It's the core values, and most people don't know what theirs are. Even they couldn't even list them if you asked them to. I mean, I remember in coaching school we had an exercise to do that early on, and it was like nobody ever asked me that. I don't even know how to start. And so now this is one of the first things I do with a new client. And I had somebody reach out to me the other day. She was having some arguments with her long-term boyfriend, and she sent me a whole punch list of issues they were having in different areas. And I said, let's go back to core values. And what are your 5 top core values? And so she had a discussion with him with his core values and comparing them to hers, and how can they meet each other's needs, and can they? And it became an easy conversation because they were talking about what really mattered and understanding how each of them is expressing those core values. So humor is expressed differently for different people, and communication we might seem like we're communicating, but for me, it's not good communication because I need a different type of communication. And so having these core value based conversations with people is really how we connect when we get deeper, or we realize that we're absolutely not aligned and we walk away.
Yeah, I think that's really key. And we get blinded by a lot of things when we first meet people.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
because and people know how to hide things too. I mean, we all know that there are narcissists out there and people who have issues, and they can hide in plain sight, and they're chameleons. And so, we have to be wary, but we have to be open. And that's hard, kind of a hard line sometimes, to open yourself up to somebody you don't know with the idea that that person may not be what you think he or she is.
Yeah, and I think if you are focused on values, you'll start to see the misalignment pretty quickly, even with somebody who's tricky, because it's pretty hard to stay consistent, to hide crazy. We overlook stuff because somebody's good looking or charming, and we're not paying attention to the inconsistencies and the lies.
Flattery.
Oh, flattery. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
that's a huge tool.
yeah, they get into our good graces and then we just forget everything. And so, anyway, let's get back to you. And we've talked about the present. You're doing all these wonderful things. What are your dreams for the future?
Well, I would like to I would like to have my own television show, and I have an idea for it that I'm sharing only just with certain people, but I'm hoping that this book will open up some opportunities and, shine the spotlight on me a little bit so people know who I am and my history. And I'm hoping that I can do it. And this idea that I have would be very helpful to a lot of people. And again, I wish I could share it, but I don't want to spoil it and have it be out there before I've really put it together in a format that I want to propose to some networks. But that's my dream, because I would like to get away from practicing law a little bit. I probably will always dabble in it. But I would like to do that less and do some of this creative stuff a little bit more.
Sounds amazing. I hope that it comes true for you and that
Thank
it
you.
comes through.
I
And
appreciate
by
it.
the way, we just to kind of close the loop on, sorry about your loss of your husband.
Oh,
And
thank you.
did you find a partner who was not his clone?
I did. I did. I got set up on a blind date. I had never been on a blind date before. And I thought he was divorced and he thought I was divorced. It turned out his wife died 3 days before mine did. And it was just a coincidence. And so the first date was really just commiserating, because when you have someone die, someone like that die, it's not like a divorce. Divorce is loss and grief and all that stuff, but this is very different. And we both really loved our spouses and we both worked with them. So we lost our best friend, our lover, our business partner. And so when I was able to get outside of my own little pity party and really start being empathetic to somebody else, that really healed me. Never heal me all the way, but like it really changed my grief, and it lessened it, because I was really trying to help somebody else instead of feeling sorry for myself. And I think the same thing happened with me and him, with how he treated me. So now we're married, and
Oh,
so there's a happy ending to the story.
oh, that's wonderful. And I love how you were able to heal each other
Mhm.
and love each other, which is wonderful. I think a lot of people, like you mentioned also, that there are widows and widowers who did not have a great marriage, and
Right.
you both did. And so I think there's, again, a lot of assumptions made that it's good to date a widow or a widower because they had a perfect marriage and they're really healthy people with no baggage. And so
Yeah,
not
no,
always true.
there's complication, because that person is always on a pedestal. And the other thing that's interesting is that my my second husband is very different than my first husband, as I am very different from his first wife. And so we've lost a lot of friends, not in any, drag out fight, but just because I'm so different, and that dynamic that those couples had were not the same with me, vice versa. So, but we had to learn to say goodbye to people who weren't going to be happy for us. And, while I love my friends who try to protect me, is if I'm happy and I'm in a good relationship with a good person, you better be happy for me, because, well, otherwise you're not my friend.
Yeah,
So,
friendships ebb and flow. I mean, especially as we change, a lot of our friends are not going to stay in our lives. And
yeah,
I think that's an important thing that a lot of people also don't realize. They get really upset that their friends are not there for them. And it is upsetting. But I personally, I have a small inner circle now. It's become much smaller, and I really have no tolerance for spending a lot of time with people when they're very stuck, when they're very negative.
yes,
These people are not in my life anymore.
yes, I agree.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into the lightning round. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Fill in the blank. I used to think I wasn't blank enough.
I used to think I wasn't smart enough.
What was the number one thing holding you back from becoming a woman of value?
I think it was how I was raised and how I was told that I couldn't do certain things, and I bought into that.
So you were told there were limitations as a woman.
Yes, yes.
Uh, what is the best advice you can give to a woman who wants to become more empowered?
To surround yourself by positive people, and people who have your back, and make sure that the significant other in your life will do as much for you as you would do for him or her. And if you don't have somebody who has your back, this is a really sad, long life. that person should have your back all the time. And you should go to sleep knowing that.
Yeah. And have your own back too.
Yes.
That's a lot of people don't do that to
Yes.
begin with, and then they end up attracting all kinds of people who don't support them. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Have more confidence. You always had it in you. You were smart enough and you could always do all those things. And you shouldn't have listened to those people who told you otherwise.
If only we could know that when we're young,
Right.
right? What is something people often get wrong about you, Karen?
That I'm very hard because I have to be very firm and very persuasive and assertive in my professional life. But I'm very much empathetic. I'm very loyal and I'm very open to helping people. And I have a softer side that I may not show during my workday.
And that's okay, right? I think that a lot of people have to show up at work in a certain way. And just because you're firm doesn't mean you're not soft. I think that the best leaders have the ability to be firm and kind and soft and know when to use which.
I always say steel over silk.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want people who are flimsy. There's a lot
Right.
of that out there where they're not sure who they are and they kind of flop and fly with the wind and become whoever you want them to be. And so finally, Karen, how would you like to be remembered?
I would like to be remembered as a good friend, a good author, a good lawyer, a good advocate, and a good person. And I would like people to have a moment where they can say that I helped them or I gave them a kind word or that I changed their life in a positive way.
Beautiful. Share one contact and we'll have the
Sure.
rest in the show notes.
The easiest place is KarenConti.com, KarenConti. Hello@KarenConti.com is my email address. And if you want to know more about me, that's the best place to go. And you can sign up for newsletters and whatever I put out. And we're doing books and book clubs and virtual events. And should be a lot of fun here with this book being launched.
Yeah. So tell us again the name of the book so people can find it.
Sure. It's, thank you. Killing Time with John Wayne Gacy, defending America's most evil serial killer on death row. It's on Amazon and Walmart and Books A Million and Barnes and Noble. And I really think it's an uplifting book. I think especially for women, that even though that's kind of a creepy title, that title is not exactly what the book is about. It's about taking a bad experience and using it to your advantage later in life.
Which is always very inspirational. And I look forward to hearing more about your show and all the good things that you're up to. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I love your energy. You have such a positive energy about you. You look at life with a beautiful lens. And I know that you're inspiring tons of people out there to do the same. So thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Sandy. And thank you for doing all you do for people who listen.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for listening. If you love our show, please give us a high rating on Apple Podcasts. And as always, remember to be a woman of value. If you would like to step more fully into your value, grab a free copy of The Ultimate Guide to Becoming a Woman of Value on my website, thewomanofvalue.com. Just click the link at the top of the homepage. And if you haven't already done so, be sure to click the subscribe button in your listening app. And if there's something in this episode that inspired you, please share it with others, because the more we share these inspirational stories, the more women of value we will have in this world. I'll see you next time.